Hello and welcome to White Horse Music TV! My name is Richard Bodiner and I'm co-owner of this wonderful shop with my lovely wife Michelle Bodiner, who's not here at the moment. Don't worry, it's okay, I'll be alright. Well, today is going to be a really exciting, interesting video because, you know, people sometimes come in to the shop and they say, I just want an antique full-size violin. I don't want to see any of the new ones, I just want the antique ones. And some people come in and say, I'm just looking for a new full-size violin because they sound better and I don't want any really old ones. And or they'll come in and say, I'm just looking for a handmade violin. I don't want any, you know, that are not handmade. And so, you know, I'm going to try violins that are old, violins that are new, violins that are handmade, violins that are workshop made, all of that sort of thing, so we can get an idea of the differences, if there are differences. So first off, I might start off with this violin. Okay. So this, my friends, is a handmade Australian violin made by Paul Ridden, and it's labelled Paul Sorensen. What on earth? Well, he explained to me that his grandfather's name, who played violin, was called Paul Sorensen, and so it's, you know, named after him, which is pretty nice. And so we've recently started stocking his violins. They're beautiful handmade Australian violins. He uses very beautiful wood and uses an amber varnish. He actually studied, well, he's an engineer and he's done a lot of research into acoustics. And one thing that I like about him, which is I found really sort of interesting and funny, is that he said, do you like the sound of the violins? And I said, yes, I love them. He said, would you like them to be brighter? Would you like them to be this or that? Because, you know, he's done a lot of research into acoustics and he can change the sound of the violins. And I sort of like that, having that sort of control, because being a violin maker, you sort of have to be an artist, but you sort of have to be a scientist as well. And so I thought that was really cool. Anyway, so there's that one. I've got two of his, whoops, I'm just going to bash the Heinrich Gill violin. I've got two of his violins here, and you'll notice one is very dark and one is not so dark. One has little freckles. He calls that the freckled violin. And one doesn't have freckles. And they look quite different. But they don't sound that dissimilar, which I sort of like, because I know what I'm getting with his violins. And then I have an old favourite. This is a Heinrich Gill X7 violin. Heinrich Gill have been making violins since 1952. And this is their top model, using the highest quality wood. And they've had stores of tone wood which have built up over the years, so they use very old tone wood. And they're always beautifully made, extremely schmick creatures. So very impressed with the look of that guy. And then this one is 100-odd-year-old, I'm going to say around 110, 120-year-old French violin. Now this is what I would call a workshop-made violin, and in fact I'd also call the Heinrich Gill workshop-made violin, albeit a very, very small workshop. And it's made in a workshop in France, but very, very well made. A very beautiful straight grain spruce and very beautiful maple on the back there. And it's a copy of a Nicolas Lupot violin. Nicolas Lupot was a famous, like an amazing French maker that a lot of makers like to copy. And they liked to copy, it's funny, you know, a violin from a couple of 100 years ago. People 100 years ago liked to copy violins that were made a couple of 100 years ago. So very exciting. All right, Richard has talked a lot, so now I'm going to play these violins. So I'll start out with the Paul Sorensen violins. This is Paul Sorensen Freckly. So if you especially want Paul Sorensen Freckly, you're going to have to ring up and say, oh, I want Paul Sorensen Freckly. Not the person, the violin, because you know. I was so excited about these violins. You'll notice a lot of my hair fell out recently just being so excited about it. It's the surprise of getting new violins in the shop. Anyway, I'm going to play it. I told you I'd stop talking. Here we go. Have you ever heard anything so sort of smooth and deep and rounded? That's the sort of sound that he's going for, and that's the sort of sound that he's achieved, which I think is fantastic. All right, let's have a try of the dark Paul Sorensen violin. It sounds really similar. Maybe, no, just so similar. It's really, really deep on the bottom. Sometimes when violins are very deep on the bottom, they sound a bit shrill on top, but these ones sound really sort of even across the strings, but just nice and mellow, but big at the same time, which I think is a really nice combination. Now, this will be very interesting. I'm going to pick up the Heinrich Gill X7 violin, which I didn't destroy by bumping it just before, so that's good. Now, let's see what this one's like. Okay, so the Heinrich Gill X7 violins, they're always really dependable violins in that you know they're going to be really nice. They use their scientifically, what do they say? Acoustically treated violins anyway. They make 5 of the tops and they try to make them acoustically similar so that they can have a more consistent sort of violin, and they're all consistently delicious. I would say it's not as full and round sounding as the Sorensen violins. Similar sort of volume, but probably slightly more focused, a bit more projecty sort of sound. So different to the Sorensen violins. I would find it hard to choose between those two. Of course, I suggest that if you're struggling to choose between those two, then you choose both of them. Now for the antique Frenchie. Now, the Sorensen violins, well, the Ridden violins, they are handmade. The Heinrich Gill violin is more of a workshop-made violin, and this one, this antique one, is also a workshop-made violin, but it's, over 100 years old. So let's have a try. Okay, so I would say that's even more focused than the Heinrich Gill violin. So it's sort of heading away from that mellow, sort of smooth, mellow sort of sound and heading more towards the, bright, intense, let's knock someone over with a splitting, not a splitting headache, but a splitting sound that breaks stuff. That's just heading in the wrong direction. But yeah, a really strong, punchy sort of sound. Really different from the others. And, you know, it sort of breaks barriers as far as a lot of the time when people come in for an old violin, they're looking for something, they want old because they think that's going to be mellow and round and rich. Well, that's not always the case, because you've got thousands of makers who have made violins throughout history, and this could be any one of those, you know, particular makers and those particular sounds. In this case, I'd say the Ridden violins, labelled Sorensen, are more of that sort of round, antique-y sort of sound, where the antique violin is more of a modern sort of sound, and the Heinrich Gill possibly sort of in between. Now that I've done all of that talking and playing, I'm going to play them one by one without talking. All right, I'll start, I think I did it in this order. I'll start with the freckly Ridden violin, and then the next Ridden, the dark Ridden violin, and then the Heinrich Gill violin, and then the antique violin. Let's have a try. Okay. Dark Ridden violin. Tasty. Now the Heinrich Gill X7 violin. And now the antique Frenchie. Okay, that was a nice sort of nice lineage to use, to have the nice mellow ones breaking into sort of a more projecty, sharper sounding one towards the end. I, as usual, suggest you buy all of them, and that will make me very happy. Thanks for watching.